The wind howled across the frozen mountains like a beast in pain. Snow fell so thick that the world seemed made only of white and shadow. A lonely cabin stood in the middle of that endless storm, its roof buried under ice. Inside, a single human man worked near a dying fire trying to keep the flames alive. His name was Ethan Gray, a widowed father who had lived in the mountains since the war ended. He used to be a soldier. Now he was just a man trying to survive with his little daughter, Lily. She was asleep in the next room wrapped in thick blankets. Ethan looked at her small hand peeking out, then at the window shaking from the storm. The firewood was almost gone and he sighed. He had to go out again. He pulled on his heavy coat, grabbed a lantern, and stepped outside. The cold hit him like knives. Snow bit into his skin and the wind screamed in his ears. He pushed forward, every step sinking deep into the ice. He muttered to himself, just a few logs, then back to Lily. But then, something stopped him. Through the roar of the blizzard came a sound, faint, sharp, and full of fear. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal he knew. It sounded almost like crying. Ethan turned his head, squinting through the storm. The sound came again, 2 short, weak cries. He felt a chill crawl up his neck. Out here there was nothing alive except wolves and stories. Stories of creatures that hunted lost travelers. Still, the sound called again, softer this time, like something begging not to die. Ethan hesitated. Probably just the wind, he whispered. But his legs moved anyway. His heart told him to follow it. He walked toward the sound, his boots crunching over ice. His lantern light flickered against the snow until he saw something, a dark shape half buried near a fallen tree. He moved closer, brushing off the snow with his gloved hand, and then he froze. Under the ice were 2 tiny creatures, curled together, shivering. Their scales glimmered faintly under the lantern light, silver and blue. Little wings were folded tight against their bodies. One opened its mouth and gave a weak chirp. Steam came out with its breath. Ethan stepped back, his heart racing. "No, that's not possible," he breathed. "Dragons." He had seen them before during the war. Huge monsters that burned tanks and tore through the sky. The dragons had vanished after the war ended, retreating to their hidden mountains. But these were babies, barely alive. The smaller one moved its head and looked up at him. Its golden eyes blinked slowly, full of pain. Then it let out another soft cry, weaker this time. Ethan felt something break inside him. He couldn't leave them. Not like this. He pulled off his thick coat and carefully wrapped the 2 tiny bodies in it. They were ice cold, so fragile he was afraid they might stop breathing. He held them close, feeling faint heat under their scales. "Easy now," he whispered. "You're safe." The wind screamed again, louder, as if warning him. The snow came down harder. Ethan knew he had to get back to the cabin fast. He pushed through the storm, shielding the babies with his arms. The path vanished under snow, but he kept moving, guided only by the weak light of his lantern. At last, the cabin appeared through the white blur. He burst inside and shut the door behind him, gasping for air. The warmth hit his face. The fire was low, but it was still burning. He laid the 2 dragons near the fire on a soft blanket. Their bodies were stiff, their breathing faint, but they were alive. He rubbed their scales gently with a dry towel, melting the frost from their wings. Lily woke up and rubbed her eyes. "Daddy, what's that?" she asked softly, seeing the creatures by the fire. Ethan looked at her, unsure what to say. "They're lost babies," he said quietly. They were freezing outside. She knelt beside them, eyes wide. "They're beautiful." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, they are." As the minutes passed, the dragons began to move a little more. The smaller one opened its mouth and let out a tiny puff of warm smoke. Lily giggled. Ethan couldn't help but smile too. But then he looked toward the window. The storm still raged outside, and deep in the distance he thought he heard something else, a roar. Not a small one. Not human, something massive, ancient. He turned pale. If these were babies, then somewhere out there their mother was looking for them. And when she found out a human had taken her children, the storm would be the least of his problems. Ethan looked down at the 2 small dragons again. One of them blinked and rested its head on his hand. He sighed, his heart torn between fear and pity. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'll keep you safe, no matter what comes." Outside, lightning flashed behind the clouds. A shadow moved in the sky far above the mountains, something enormous gliding silently through the blizzard. The Dragon Empress had just awakened. Morning came slowly to the frozen mountains. The storm had passed, leaving everything silent and white. The sun rose weakly behind the clouds, shining like a cold coin in the gray sky. Inside the cabin, the fire still burned, throwing soft light over the wooden walls. Ethan sat on the floor beside the fireplace, his arms wrapped around himself. He hadn't slept. The two baby dragons lay close to the fire, covered with blankets. Their small chests moved up and down, breathing evenly now. Steam curled from their nostrils as the warmth returned to their tiny bodies. He had no idea what to do next. He only knew one thing. If anyone from the human settlements found out what was inside his home, he and Lily would be taken away. The military still hated dragons. They would kill these little ones without hesitation. But when he looked at their fragile bodies, so small and helpless, Ethan couldn't turn away. Lily came out of her room, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She smiled sleepily and knelt near the dragons. "Daddy, they're still alive," she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, you helped save them." Lily giggled softly as one of the dragons twitched its wings and stretched. The smaller one lifted its head, blinking at the girl curiously. Its golden eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. It tilted its head, then let out a small chirp like a bird greeting the dawn. Lily gasped. "It talked!" Ethan chuckled quietly. "Not quite. It's just saying hello." He held out a hand carefully. The baby sniffed his fingers, then licked them once with a warm, rough tongue. The touch made Ethan freeze for a second. It wasn't cold anymore. The little creature's body was heating up. "That's right," he said softly. "You're getting better." The larger dragon opened one eye and hissed weakly. Its wings twitched and it tried to stand but fell again. Ethan leaned forward and supported it gently.
"Easy there," he whispered.
"You're safe." For a moment, both dragons looked at him and something changed in the air. The fear faded. They recognized his scent, his warmth, the steady beat of his heart. They no longer saw an enemy. The smaller dragon curled closer to Lily, resting its head in her lap. Lily stroked its back slowly, her tiny hand moving over the smooth scales. "Daddy," she said softly, "can we keep them?" Ethan sighed, staring at the fire. "Sweetheart, they're not like pets. They're wild creatures." "But they're babies," she said, looking at him with pleading eyes. "They need us." He couldn't argue with that. Deep down, he knew she was right. He reached for a bowl, melted some snow by the fire, and poured warm water into a small dish. Then he took out dried meat from the shelf and cut it into tiny pieces. The dragons sniffed the air immediately. Their small heads rose, eyes glowing brighter. "Hungry, huh?" Ethan said with a tired smile. He placed the bowl in front of them. The smaller one crawled forward, clumsy but determined. It grabbed a piece in its mouth and chewed slowly. The larger one followed, its eyes never leaving Ethan. He sat back, watching them eat. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty. It felt alive. Lily laughed softly when one of them sneezed and a tiny spark flew from its nose. Ethan quickly poured a little snow over the spark before it caught anything. "Okay," he said, chuckling. "No fire tricks inside." Lily smiled wide. "They like you, Daddy." He looked at the two dragons, then at her. Maybe they just liked being alive. Outside, the wind had grown quiet, but the mountains held another kind of silence. The heavy, watching kind. Somewhere far above, a shadow moved between the clouds. The Dragon Empress was searching. Her mind reached across miles, feeling the faint heartbeats of her children. She roared into the cold air, her voice echoing across the peaks. Every creature on the mountain trembled. Inside the cabin, Ethan heard it faintly, just a deep, distant thunder. He froze, his blood turned cold. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Lily looked toward the window. "The wind?" "No," Ethan said softly. "That wasn't the wind." He walked to the door and opened it slightly. The horizon glowed red for a moment, then faded back to gray. The sound came again, deeper this time. It rolled through the air like a heartbeat. Ethan closed the door quickly. He turned toward the fire, his mind racing. If that was what he thought it was, then the mother was coming. He looked at the two small dragons now cuddled beside his daughter, eyes closed in peace. His throat tightened. "I guess we're out of time," he whispered. He spent the next few hours preparing, blocking the windows with thick boards, stacking snow against the door, loading his old rifle. He wasn't planning to fight a dragon. He just needed to protect Lily long enough to escape if things went bad. When night fell, the flames in the fireplace flickered low. The dragons were sleeping again, their bodies glowing faintly with inner warmth. Ethan sat by the window, rifle in hand, staring into the dark sky. A soft sound made him turn. The smaller dragon had crawled toward him, its tiny claws clicking against the floor. It looked up at him, eyes shining gold in the dim light. Then it made a soft chirp and curled up beside his leg, resting its head there. Ethan felt something deep in his chest, a strange peace. He reached down and stroked its neck gently. "You trust me now, huh?" he whispered. Outside, snow began to fall again, slow, heavy flakes drifting in the moonlight. Far above, unseen through the clouds, enormous wings spread across the sky. The Dragon Empress had found her children's scent, and she was getting closer. The storm had ended, but the silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. The snow outside sparkled under the pale moon, and the forest stood still as if the whole mountain was holding its breath. Inside the cabin, the fire was burning low. Ethan sat near it, rubbing his tired eyes. He hadn't slept for 2 nights. The 2 baby dragons slept quietly beside the hearth, their tiny bodies now warm and glowing softly in shades of silver and blue. They had grown stronger. The smaller one sometimes purred like a cat in its sleep. The larger one twitched its wings and occasionally breathed small wisps of smoke. Lily was asleep upstairs, safe under blankets. For a moment, Ethan let himself breathe. He stared into the fire and whispered to himself, "Maybe their mother gave up." But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. He walked to the window, brushing the frost off the glass with his glove. The forest outside was dark, only the faint shimmer of moonlight reflecting off the snow. Then he froze. There were lights in the distance, not fire, not stars, drones. Small red and blue glows moved in the trees like fireflies. He knew that looked too well. The military, Ethan's heart raced. "No, not now," he whispered. He knew the army had scanning drones patrolling this region. If they detected dragon heat signatures, they'd bring strike teams, men with flamethrowers and rifles made for dragon scales. He looked back at the sleeping dragons. They were breathing deeply, unaware of the danger. He put out the fire quickly, covering it with a metal lid to kill the light. Darkness filled the cabin. He listened carefully. The hum of engines grew closer, low, mechanical, steady. He crouched near the window again. 3 drones floated through the tree line, their red sensors scanning the snow. A voice crackled faintly through their speakers. "Command, this is Patrol Unit 7. We're detecting 2 heat signatures near an unregistered cabin." Ethan clenched his fists. His worst fear had come true. He moved quickly, covering the dragons with blankets, tucking them under the wooden table. They stirred softly but didn't wake. Then he grabbed his old rifle and stood near the door, his breath shallow. There was a knock. 3 sharp bangs. "Human settlement control," a voice called out through the cold. "Open the door." Ethan didn't move. Another knock, harder this time. "We know you're in there." Ethan looked at the stairs. Lily stood halfway down, clutching her stuffed toy, eyes wide with fear. He gestured for her to go back, to stay quiet. She nodded and disappeared. The knock came again, then a hand on the doorknob. Ethan pointed his rifle at the door but didn't speak. The doorknob rattled once or twice, then stopped. Silence, and then a roar shook the sky. The walls of the cabin trembled. The soldiers outside screamed, their voices fading into chaos. Ethan ran to the window just in time to see one of the drones explode in the air, hit by a blast of fire. The other 2 tried to rise but were crushed mid-flight by a shadow bigger than the cabin itself. For a moment, the whole mountain lit up in red flame. Ethan stumbled back, heart pounding. He knew what it was. The Dragon Empress had arrived. The dragons under the table woke, squealing softly. Their eyes glowed golden with excitement and fear. They knew that roar. It was their mother's call. Ethan rushed to them, whispering, No, stay quiet." But they chirped louder, as if answering her. The ground shook again. Outside, snow fell from the trees in thick clouds. Through the window, Ethan saw something move. Massive wings cutting across the moonlight, scales flashing gold and crimson. The Empress circled once, her wings creating a windstorm that ripped branches from trees. He ducked under the table as the roof groaned above him. The air grew heavy, filled with the smell of smoke and ash. Then suddenly silence again. He waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then came the sound of claws, huge claws, landing in the snow outside his cabin. Thud, thud. Each step made the floor shake. Ethan crawled toward the window, slowly peeking outside. What he saw stole his breath. The Dragon Empress stood just outside his home, her head towering above the roof, her eyes glowing like suns. Her scales shimmered like living metal, and the heat from her body melted the snow around her into steam. She lowered her head, sniffing the air. Her voice entered his mind like thunder. "My children are inside." Ethan stumbled back, clutching his chest. It wasn't a sound. It was a voice directly in his thoughts. Powerful. Ancient. The smaller dragon chirped softly from under the table, and the Empress turned her gaze toward the sound. The window shattered from the heat of her breath. Flames flickered in her throat, ready to burn. Ethan did the only thing he could think of. He ran in front of the dragon, spreading his arms wide. "Stop!" he shouted. "Please don't." The Empress froze, surprised. He could feel the heat pressing against his face, burning the air he breathed. But he didn't move. "They were dying," he yelled. "I saved them." The Empress blinked once. The fire in her mouth dimmed slightly. Her golden eyes narrowed, studying him. For a moment everything was still. Then, in a voice that shook the mountain, she spoke again. "Human, if that is true, then you are either very brave or very foolish." Her massive shadow covered the cabin as she leaned closer, smoke rising from her nostrils. The air trembled. Ethan didn't move an inch. And deep inside the cabin, hidden beneath the floor, the smaller dragon let out one soft chirp, calling her mother. The Empress's eyes softened. The fire in her throat vanished, but her gaze stayed locked on Ethan. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice rumbling like an earthquake, "you will answer for what you have done." She spread her wings, and with a single beat, the wind knocked Ethan to the floor. The roof creaked, snow flying in all directions. In seconds, she was gone into the clouds, leaving behind silence and a promise. Ethan sat in the dark, breathing hard. He looked at the dragons and whispered, "What have I done?" Outside, the last drone flickered weakly in the snow before its light went out. The first light of dawn crept over the mountains, painting the snow in shades of gold and red. But the beauty of the morning didn't reach Ethan's heart. He sat by the cold fireplace, his rifle lying beside him, his mind spinning. He had not slept at all. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that enormous shape in the sky, the glowing eyes, the fire, the voice that shook his bones. The Dragon Empress. She had seen him. She had spoken to him. And she had promised to return. The two baby dragons were awake now, their golden eyes shining faintly in the light of the window. They chirped softly, pressing close to each other. Ethan could feel it. The air around them was different, warmer, alive, almost magical. He looked out through the cracked window. The forest was quiet again, but something deep in his chest told him it was the kind of quiet that came before a storm. Lily walked down the stairs, still rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, what happened last night?" "I heard a big noise." Ethan forced a small smile. "Just thunder, sweetheart." She looked doubtful. "That didn't sound like thunder," he sighed. She was right. Nothing in this world sounded like that roar. Before he could answer, the smaller dragon suddenly lifted its head. Its ears twitched. It looked toward the window and gave a short, sharp chirp. The larger one followed, wings twitching nervously. Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Then the cabin began to shake. The dishes rattled on the shelves. Dust fell from the beams. Lily screamed as the floor trembled beneath her feet. Ethan grabbed her and pulled her close. "Hold on!" Outside, a gust of wind tore through the trees, sending snow flying like white fire. Then came the sound. Deep, heavy, rhythmic, thud, thud, thud. Each step was louder than thunder. Ethan turned toward the window and froze. A huge shadow moved across the snow, blotting out the sun. Then, with a roar that made his ears ring, the Dragon Empress landed. The force of her landing cracked the ice on the ground. Her wings spread wide, their edges glowing like molten metal. Her scales shimmered between red and gold, reflecting the morning light. Her eyes, those enormous golden eyes, locked onto the cabin. Lily clung to Ethan's coat. "Daddy, and she's here?" He took a deep breath. "Stay behind me." The Empress lowered her massive head toward the cabin. The ground shook with every breath she took. Her voice rolled through the air like thunder, but it wasn't loud. It was controlled, calm, and terrifyingly clear. "Human, bring them to me." Ethan's throat went dry. "They're safe," he said, his voice trembling. "I took care of them." "You stole them," the Empress replied. "They are my blood." Ethan's heart pounded. He looked at the dragons, who were now chirping excitedly, their little claws scraping against the wood. They wanted to go to her. He knew if he didn't do something, she might destroy everything. He opened the door slowly, the cold air hitting his face. The Empress's shadow covered him completely. He walked out with slow, careful steps, holding one baby dragon wrapped in a blanket. The other followed, walking clumsily through the snow. The Empress lowered her head until her eyes were level with his. He could feel her hot breath, smell the scent of fire and smoke in it. Her pupils were narrow slits of gold. She was studying him, judging him. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why? Did you save what you should have feared?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Because they were dying," he said. "Because I couldn't just watch them freeze." The Empress's eyes flickered. For a second, the firelight inside them dimmed. She tilted her head slightly. "Do you know what I could do to you, human? One breath from me, and you would be nothing but ash." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know. And yet you stand before me?" He met her gaze. "If you're going to burn me, just make sure my daughter doesn't see it." The Empress blinked. For a long moment she said nothing. The smaller dragon in Ethan's arms chirped and reached toward her, its wings fluttering weakly. The Empress's massive nostrils flared as she sniffed her child, her eyes softening just a little. Then slowly, she lowered her enormous claw. It could have crushed Ethan in one move, but instead, it came to rest gently on the snow. The baby dragon climbed onto it, chirping happily. The Empress looked back at him. "You cared for them," she said almost to herself. "Fed them, warmed them, while knowing they are my kind, the ones your people call monsters." Ethan nodded again. "Monsters don't cry in the snow." For a long time there was silence. Then the Empress exhaled slowly and the fire in her throat faded. Her scales dimmed from red to soft gold. "You are a strange man, human." Ethan managed a tired smile. "I've been told that before." The Empress turned her head slightly, looking toward the cabin. Through the door she saw Lily standing there, eyes wide, clutching the other baby dragon. The child did not scream or run. She just stared, pure, fearless wonder on her face. The Empress's eyes softened. "Your young one is not afraid," she said. "She doesn't know how to hate yet," Ethan replied quietly. The Empress lifted her head slowly, her wings spreading. Snow whirled around her like smoke. She looked down once more. "Your kindness will not go unseen, human. But kindness toward dragons carries danger. Both our worlds will judge you." Ethan nodded. "Then let them judge." The Empress stared at him for another long moment. Then she gave a sound that was not quite a roar. It was something deeper, like an ancient sigh. She rose into the sky, her wings creating a hurricane of snow. Ethan shielded his face as the wind howled past him. When he looked up again, she was gone. The mountain fell silent once more. But something had changed. The air felt alive, warm, protected. Ethan turned back to the cabin. Lily ran to him and hugged him tight. "Daddy," she whispered. "Is she gone?" He smiled faintly, looking up at the faint glimmer in the clouds. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "She's watching." And far above, hidden in the mist, the Dragon Empress circled once more, her golden eyes watching the little cabin that had dared to challenge fear itself. The mountain slept under a blanket of stars. The storm had passed, and the night was calm, almost peaceful. But Ethan couldn't rest. He sat beside the fire, his hand around a mug of cold tea, staring at the dancing flames. His daughter was upstairs, sleeping soundly, holding her stuffed toy and one of the baby dragons close. The other dragon rested, near the fire, breathing softly, its small chest rising and falling. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Every sound made Ethan tense. He couldn't shake the memory of her, the Dragon Empress, her glowing eyes, her voice that echoed in his bones. She had spared him, yes, but he didn't believe that was the end. He looked at the door. She'll come back, he whispered to himself. She has to. And he was right. Far above the sleeping forest, two massive wings cut through the sky without a sound. The Dragon Empress moved like a shadow made of gold and flame. Her eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. She had been watching since dawn, circling the mountain, waiting. Now, as the moon reached its highest point, she descended once more. Her claws touched the snow with the softness of falling feathers. The ground barely trembled this time. She folded her wings and crouched low, her gaze fixed on the small wooden cabin. "Let us see, human," she murmured, her voice rumbling deep within the earth. "If your mercy is real, or just fear." Inside, the fire flickered. Ethan felt something change in the air, an invisible pressure, heavy and ancient. The baby dragon beside him woke suddenly, its eyes wide. It chirped once and hid under the table. Then, a knock, a deep, slow knock that made the wood shiver. Ethan stood up, heart pounding. He reached for his rifle but stopped halfway. A strange warmth filled the air, like the breath of a giant beast. He walked to the door slowly and opened it just a crack. Outside, he saw her again, the Empress. Her body filled the clearing. Her scales shimmered like burning metal in the moonlight. Her eyes glowed softly, not with anger, but with something unreadable. Ethan stepped outside, his breath visible in the cold. "You came back," he said quietly. "I gave you your life," the Empress said, her voice soft but strong. "Now I wish to see what you do with it." He frowned. "What do you mean?" Her gaze flicked toward the cabin. "You claim kindness, human. But kindness fades when tested." Before Ethan could reply, the ground cracked open beside him. Fire roared up from beneath the snow, forming a perfect circle of light around the cabin. The flames burned blue, not hot, not cold, but alive with magic. Lily woke upstairs, startled by the glow that filled her room. "Daddy?" she cried. "It's okay," he shouted, though his voice shook. He turned back to the Empress. "What is this?" "A test," she said. "Prove that your words were truth." The baby dragons came running to the door, chirping and squealing. One ran toward the Empress, the other stayed near Ethan's feet, trembling. The Empress lowered her head. "Give them to me," she commanded. "Show me you are not selfish. Show me you would return them, even if it means your death." Ethan froze. His throat went dry. He looked down at the little dragons, the tiny creatures he had nursed back to life. They looked up at him, confused, afraid. He had grown attached to them. So had Lily. He took a deep breath and knelt. "Come on, little one," he whispered, lifting the smaller dragon into his arms. "Go home now." It chirped sadly, curling closer to him, refusing to leave. He smiled softly. "You have a big mom waiting for you," he said. "Don't make her wait." Then, slowly, he walked toward the Empress. His boots crunched on the snow. He could feel her eyes watching every step he took. When he reached her, he stopped and raised the baby dragon toward her massive claw. "Take her," he said quietly. The Empress lowered her talon and let the small creature climb up. For a moment, her gaze softened, but then she looked at the second dragon, still near the cabin, crying softly, hiding behind Lily's legs. "And the other?" she asked. Ethan turned. Lily was standing in the doorway, tears in her eyes. "Daddy, no," she shouted. "They'll be lonely." He hesitated. His heart felt heavy. He wanted to protect both his daughter and the dragons, but this was the Empress's test. He walked back slowly and knelt beside Lily. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "we have to let them go. They don't belong to us." Lily shook her head. "But they love you." He smiled, touching her hair gently. "Love doesn't mean keeping someone locked away. Sometimes love means letting them go home. Her lip trembled, but after a long moment she nodded. Together, they lifted the second baby dragon. It chirped once, then turned its glowing eyes toward the Empress. The Empress watched in silence. Then, with a deep breath, she lowered her head and whispered, "Enough." The blue fire vanished instantly. The night went still again. Ethan looked up at her, unsure what would happen next. The Empress gazed down at him for a long time before speaking. "You could have lied," she said softly. "You could have hidden them. But you did not." Her massive eyes glowed brighter. "Your heart speaks truth. Few among your kind would pass such a test." Ethan stood there, the cold wind brushing his face. "I just did what anyone decent would do." The Empress shook her head slowly. "No, human, not anyone. Only the rarest souls see beyond fear." She looked toward the cabin where Lily stood, her small hands trembling but brave. "And that one, she carries your courage." Ethan smiled weakly. "She's her mother's daughter." For the first time, the Empress's voice softened completely. "Then perhaps your world still has hope." She spread her wings, and the snow swirled in golden circles around her. The two baby dragons climbed up her scales, chirping joyfully. She looked down one last time. "The debt of fire is not forgotten, human. One day, it will be repaid." And with a thunderous flap of her wings, she rose into the sky, disappearing into the clouds, leaving only sparks of gold drifting in the air. Ethan watched until the light faded, his breath clouding in the cold. Then he looked down at Lily, who wiped her tears and smiled faintly. "She'll come back, won't she, Daddy?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered. "One day she will." Far above the frozen peaks, a golden roar echoed through the night, soft, proud, and full of promise. The Empress of Flames had found her judgment. 3 days passed since the Dragon Empress vanished into the clouds. The snow had stopped falling, and the mountain returned to its cold, lonely silence. But for Ethan and Lily, everything felt different. The cabin no longer seemed like just a small shelter in the middle of nowhere. It felt like something greater now, protected, almost blessed. The fire burned warmer, the air lighter. Sometimes when Ethan stepped outside at night, he swore he could still see a faint golden glow over the treetops, like a watchful eye in the sky. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew she was still out there, watching them. Lily spent her mornings drawing pictures of dragons in the snow. She laughed again, something Ethan hadn't heard in years. The pain of the past, the war, the loss of his wife seemed a little less heavy now. But deep inside, he also carried a strange fear, because when powerful beings owed you something, it was never simple. That evening, while Lily slept, Ethan sat outside by the frozen pond, sharpening his axe. The air was still. The moon was full. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "You said you'd repay the debt. I don't need anything. Just leave us in peace." His voice vanished into the wind. Then he heard it, a soft whoosh, like wings cutting through the air. He looked up quickly but saw nothing. The trees moved, branches bending slightly under a heavy, unseen presence. The fire beside him flickered low. A few seconds later, something landed behind him. The ground shivered. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. "I told you I don't want anything," he said quietly. A deep, familiar voice rolled through the night. "You misunderstand, human. This debt is not a choice." Ethan turned slowly. There she was, the Dragon Empress, standing half-hidden in the mist. Her scales glowed like molten gold under the moonlight, and her eyes burned with calm fire. But something was different this time. Her presence didn't feel threatening. It felt ancient, wise, protective. He stood up slowly, his breath visible in the cold air. "Why are you here?" "To keep my promise," she said. "You returned what was mine. You saved what no human should have dared to touch. Now the skies owe you." Ethan frowned. "I don't need skies owing me anything. Just let me raise my daughter in peace." The Empress lowered her head slightly, her voice soft. "Peace does not last long on this mountain." Before he could ask what she meant, the ground rumbled beneath their feet. A low, distant explosion echoed across the forest. The trees swayed and birds fled from the treetops. Ethan turned toward the sound. Smoke rose on the horizon. He cursed under his breath. Miners, he said. They're blasting again. Closer than they should. The Empress's eyes narrowed. Not miners. Ethan looked at her, confused. Hunters, she said. Your kind came searching for what you hid. They bring fire and poison. They seek revenge. Ethan's blood ran cold. The army? The Empress nodded slowly. They have found your trail. They know a human saved Dragon Young. To them, that is treason. Ethan grabbed his coat and ran toward the cabin. Lily, the Empress followed, her massive wings folding close as she walked through the trees like a golden storm. Snow melted wherever she stepped. Ethan burst through the door. Lily sat up in bed, startled. Daddy, what's happening?
Get your boots, baby, he said, kneeling beside her.
We need to go. From outside came the distant hum of engines. Searchlights cut through the forest, sweeping over the snow. Voices shouted commands. They were close. The Empress's voice echoed softly through the cabin walls. Stay inside. Before Ethan could protest, a bright flare exploded outside, lighting the entire clearing in red. Soldiers in heavy winter armor marched through the trees, carrying flamethrowers and rifles. Their leader pointed toward the cabin. There, that's him. The dragon sympathizer. Ethan stood by the window, gripping his rifle. He knew he couldn't win this fight. The leader shouted again, "Burn the house!" But before any soldier could act, the sky exploded in light. A wave of heat rolled across the clearing as the Dragon Empress unleashed her roar, a sound so powerful it froze every heart. Her wings spread wide, blocking out the moon. Fire poured from her mouth, but it didn't touch the cabin. It burned in a perfect circle around it, forming a wall of golden flame. The soldiers screamed and fell back. Their armor melted. Their lights flickered and died. The Empress's voice thundered across the forest. You trespass on sacred debt, leave, or burn. Her words struck like lightning. The soldiers dropped their weapons and ran, vanishing into the trees. Then came silence again. The fire faded slowly, leaving only glowing embers in the snow. Ethan stepped outside, trembling. The Empress loomed above him, her breath steaming in the cold. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Now they'll hunt you too. Let them try, she answered, her tone almost amused. The skies belong to me. Lily came running out, barefoot, clutching her stuffed toy. You saved us again, she cried, looking up in awe. The Empress lowered her massive head until her eye was level with Lily. For a long moment she stared at the tiny human child who had once hugged her dragonlings. Then she said softly, Your father's courage burns brighter than fire. You must carry it always. Lily smiled shyly. I will. Ethan bowed his head slightly. I don't know how to thank you. You already have, the Empress replied. You reminded me that mercy still lives among humans. She spread her wings, their golden light washing over the snow. The wind lifted Ethan's coat, scattering sparks into the night sky. Our debt is paid, she said, but our bond remains. And with a single beat of her wings, she rose into the sky, her light fading into the clouds like a star disappearing at dawn. Ethan stood in the snow, his heart heavy, yet full of wonder. He looked up at the sky where the golden glow slowly vanished and whispered, Goodbye, Empress. Beside him, Lily smiled, holding his hand. She'll come back, Daddy, I know she will. And far above, beyond the storm clouds, a single roar echoed through the heavens, low, distant, and filled with pride. The Dragon Empress was watching still. Many winters passed after that night of fire. The scars of battle on the mountain had long faded, but the stories never did. They said the snow there glowed faintly gold under the moon. They said that when the wind blew just right, it carried the faint sound of wings. Ethan Gray had grown older. His beard was streaked with silver, his hands rough from years of chopping wood and fixing tools. But his eyes still held that same steady calm, the look of a man who had once faced a god and chosen kindness instead of fear. His daughter Lily had grown too. She was taller now, her smile brighter. The world had changed around them. Humans had begun to rebuild, and the old wars with the dragons became stories in dusty books. But Ethan knew one thing would never change. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the Dragon Empress was still watching. That morning, snow fell softly outside the cabin. Ethan sat by the window drinking tea, while Lily packed supplies into a leather satchel. You really want to go up there today? He asked. She smiled. It's the anniversary, Dad. You said we'd visit the ridge together. Ethan chuckled softly. I was hoping you'd forget. "I never forget dragons," she said with a grin. He sighed and put on his coat. The mountain called again. The climb was hard. The trail was buried under ice, the wind sharp against their faces. But Lily was stronger than she looked, and Ethan followed her slow, steady steps. They reached the ridge by noon, the same place where he had once seen the Empress land. The view was breathtaking. Endless white peaks stretching to the horizon, clouds glowing like rivers of light. Lily unpacked the small bundle she had carried. Inside were two things: a small carved wooden dragon and a piece of shining metal, one of the soldiers' melted helmets from years ago. She placed them carefully on a flat stone. "For her," she whispered. "And for you, Mom." Ethan stood behind her, quiet. His breath fogged in the cold air. He remembered that night like it was yesterday, the roar, the heat, the shadow that covered the world. And the eyes, those golden eyes filled with both fury and mercy. He looked up at the sky. "You kept your word," he said softly. "You protected us." The wind grew stronger. Snow began to swirl in small circles around them. Lily gasped. "Dad, do you see that?" The air shimmered, glowing faintly gold. The snowflakes turned to sparks for a moment, then back to snow again. Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah," he whispered. "I see her." That night they returned home. The cabin looked smaller now, older but still warm and full of life. Ethan set more wood in the fire while Lily prepared dinner. She laughed as the stew boiled over, and for a second the smoke rising from the pot looked almost like the breath of a dragon. Later, when the stars came out, Ethan stepped outside. The world was quiet, silver under moonlight. He looked up at the sky, at the faint trail of clouds glowing softly gold, and spoke into the wind. "You can rest now, Empress." The little ones grew strong. "You did your part." He turned to go back inside, but then he heard it, a deep, distant sound, not thunder, not the wind, a roar, soft but clear, rolling through the night like music. Ethan froze, his eyes filled with tears. He didn't need to see her. He just knew. "She's here," Lily whispered behind him. She had come to the door, her blanket around her shoulders. Ethan nodded slowly. She never really left. Above the clouds, a shadow moved. Enormous wings spread, their edges glinting like liquid gold in the moonlight. For a brief second, the shape of the Dragon Empress crossed the stars, majestic, graceful, eternal. Then she was gone again, leaving behind a streak of glowing dust that fell gently like snow. Lily smiled. "Do you think she remembers us?" Ethan looked at her, his voice soft. "She remembers everything. Dragons never forget their debts." Lily stepped beside him and took his hand. "Then maybe humans shouldn't forget either." He nodded. "Maybe that's the real peace, remembering." They stood there for a long time, the firelight from the cabin glowing behind them, the mountains stretching endlessly before them. The world was quiet except for the whisper of the wind carrying one last echo through the cold air, the whisper of wings. Years later, travelers would pass by that same ridge and tell tales around their campfires. They would speak of a human who saved 2 dragon hatchlings in a blizzard, and of a mighty empress who descended from the heavens but chose not to destroy him. They said that each winter, when the snow fell thick and the night turned quiet, a golden flame appeared high above the peaks, a silent guardian watching over a small cabin and the people within. And some swore that, if you listened closely to the wind, you could still hear the voice of the Empress whispering her promise: "The debt of fire will never fade." As long as humans remember mercy, Ethan's name became a legend. The Empress became a myth. But the truth lived on, in the bond that crossed fear, fire and blood, and every winter's night, a soft glow still touched the snow outside a lonely cabin, a reminder that once, on a frozen mountain, a single human father taught a dragon queen what compassion truly meant.